I want to start off by thanking Marty for taking my place last week. I called him at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I said, Marty, I can't do it. I'm coughing like crazy, and I don't want to give it to anybody else, so can you cover me tonight? And I watched, and he did a great job, and I appreciate it. And we can just call a guy right at the last minute. I asked him about 10 minutes ago if he wanted to do tonight, and he turned me down tonight. So once was enough. He didn't want to do that again. So we're going to be talking about abortion, which Marty started last week. Mine comes from a little different angle, as you all will know. I like to kind of give you all the facts that I can come up with and then make our decisions and choices from there. I did notice one thing last week in the comments, and I would be willing to take a poll to say that I would say 99 probably percent of the folks that are here and probably listening to us online are pro-life. I don't think I'd have to go very far to confirm that. But at the same token, I know that there are people that are pro-choice that are afraid to say so because of our majority vote, so to speak, for the right to life. My personal opinion, I'm not going to bring into it right now, but I want to give you both sides of it. And the reason I want to do that is so that regardless of which side you're on, you'll be able to look at the other side and maybe look at them with a little more love and compassion, regardless of which side of the issues that you fall on. That's for this issue, for the issue we had on capital punishment, and for anything that we have time for in the future. So if you keep that in mind, I'm doing this kind of to build, sounds crazy, but to build a love feast where we can go to one another and discuss things with one another and still love one another, even though we have a 180-degree view on certain things. And I think that's something that's important. If we can't discuss it, as I said before, amongst our brothers and sisters here, there's no place we can discuss it, because this is supposed to be the heart of the love. And that's what I hope we accomplish with this. So that being said, let's go on to this pro-life or pro-choice questions about abortions. There are 3 views on abortions. The first view is that the fetus is subhuman. It's not really human yet. The second version is potentially human. Yeah, it's not working on it. Not quite there, but it's working on it. And the third one is fully human. So we'll see all 3 of those views, and I'll examine those a little bit further down in the lesson. But before that, I want to give you some statistics and the national facts that go on. There were 930,160 abortions in 2020. That's the last count that I could find. And that was by the clinical settings I got it short. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the Guttmacher Institute. Both of those are fairly well credited organizations to take these statistics. So between January 1st and 2011 and January 1st and 2019 was when this was taken. Gradually, the abortion rates have dropped, surprisingly, since the adoption of Roe versus Wade in 1973. It actually went down. Well, what was Roe versus Wade? We've heard so much about it. Do you really know what it was? Roe versus Wade was a Supreme Court decision that established a constitutional right to an abortion. In other words, it's now a constitutional right. But what happened just a few months ago? Dobbs versus Jackson and the Women's Health Organization. In 2022, the Supreme Court overturned the Roe versus Wade. 2022, the decision of the Dobbs-Jackson overturned Roe versus Wade. Is it going to change? It's kind of stuck. See if you can change it for me again. I'll back it up. Nope, won't do it.
It's from
It's frozen? Okay. Well, I'll just talk for a minute then. That'll be all right. One of the national facts, and that's actually the next slide because it's kind of important that we know what's going on in the nation, and then we're going to look at what's going on in Oklahoma. The overturning of Roe is not the same as being a federal ban on abortion. Some people have thought that well, that's going to be the whole thing. Did it work? Nope. But what it really means is the states no longer are limited in what kinds of abortion restrictions that they can pass. So they're turning it back over kind of to the states and saying, okay, you can add restrictions. We're not, there's still a right to an abortion, but you can restrict it in your state however you want to or see fit. So that's kind of an important issue to know when you're talking about it, because so much misinformation has been kicked out over Roe versus Wade and the Dobbs and Jackson bit. So I think it's slide 28 or 31. There we go. There's a national fact. All right, let's try it and see what happens. There we go. And I just said that the overturning of Roe is not the same as being a formal ban of abortion, but just other than the states are no longer limited in what kinds of abortion restrictions that they can have. What restrictions? Well, so far there are 483 restrictions passed by different states since the adoption of Roe versus Wade. That's a lot of changes that went into that law that we thought was going to be the law. Some have legal protections that will ensure abortions remain legal there. In other words, we're not going to say you can't have them in Oklahoma. It's almost the point to where you have to go somewhere else because they're saying we're not going to do it at all. But we'll talk about that when we get to the Oklahoma part of it. The national fact overview: 9 states in the United States completely ban abortion. 43 states ban abortions after a specific point in the pregnancy. Most of that is with the exceptions of emergency or life or the health of the patient. And 18 states require a waiting period of time before the abortion can take place. Now, there are other facts that go into this: the hospital and physicians, requirements. 32 states require abortions by licensed physician. 19 states require abortions in a hospital after a specific point in pregnancy. And 17 states require a second physician after a specified point, after so many months. There has to be 2 physicians, not just one, and they both have to agree. The partial birth abortion, this is the one that gives us so much of a problem, or most people so much of a problem. 44 states have laws in effect that prohibit partial birth abortion. This is the premature birth of those usually 22 months or less. Or weeks, yeah, not 22 months, not unless they're an elephant. I think an elephant carries them for 22 weeks or months. Anyway, 9 of these laws apply only to post-viability abortions. This is after 22 weeks. 22 weeks right now is just about the limit for what they can have. And I've been either fortunate or unfortunate to have my daughter who works in the NICU and handles an awful lot of these 22, 24, 25-week-old babies. And if you really don't think that's something crazy, she intubates those babies that she can fit in the palm of your hand. And I still don't know how she does it, but I'm just glad there's somebody that can do it. I couldn't even stand to watch it, much less do it, I don't think. But we've got those people that do that, and we're thankful for them. One state imposes a ban in the 3rd trimester, which is beginning at 25 weeks. If it's over 25 weeks, then they're not going to allow it. Then we have the state-mandated counseling. 17 states mandate individuals to be given counseling before an abortion, including at least one of the following topics: a link with breast cancer, 5 states; the ability of a fetus to feel pain, 12 states; and long-term mental health consequences in 8 states. And these are mandated counseling sessions that they want to send someone through before they have an abortion. The Supreme Court decision base, they referred to the decision base as merely a potential human life. A potential human life. It's not really human life yet, but it potentially could be. If personhood is established, then the fetus' right to life is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. And usually, the way they rate it now, in some places, not everywhere, when the fetus has a heartbeat that's detectable, that's when they say that life begins. Not necessarily conception, but when they pick up that first heartbeat, because that's the way they justify it by when the heartbeat stops, the life stops, it's dead. So they say, well, when it starts, it must be the beginning. When it stops, it must be the end. That's the thinking behind that. The court's decision, based on the belief that the unborn is not quite fully human. This is what we saw with Roe versus Wade and the rest. So I want to tell you a little bit about the fetus before we go too much farther, because it's important as well. That's what we're talking about. And these are the views I told you a minute ago that we would look at, a subhuman view. Now, this is the view that some have, that abortion is okay anytime during the pregnancy because they're not human yet, they're subhuman. Their basis is on the quality of life, primarily the quality of life for the mother, not for the fetus. The mother's rights, privacy over life. My body is my choice. Have you heard that enough? I've heard that an awful lot. And if that's the case, I'm in trouble because I eat like a horse. And it's my body. But it doesn't do me any good if I have another heart attack. But that's my body, I can choose. So that way I'm subhuman, I guess. This is the second view, potential human view. This is abortion is okay sometimes, depending on what the situation is. We can accept it sometimes, and sometimes it's not right. And their basis is the emergence of life. And it combines the mother's rights with the baby's rights. So they try to balance the two and say which one is the most important in this particular case. And then we have the fully human views. This is the one that says that the birth begins at conception, or that life begins at conception, and it's the right of the mother of the abortion, is never. We can't have that in any case, situation. The basis is sanctity of life, and it considers life over the privacy of the mother. Okay. So that's the three main views that we see in our pro-choice and our pro-life views. The pro-choice view, the right of the mother to decide if she wants to have the baby. Not whether she should or shouldn't, it's just if she wants to or doesn't want to. That's the pro-choice view. No unwanted baby should ever be born. That's also what they're saying. A woman said, if I don't want it, it should never be born. What kind of life would it have? If it's, if I give it up, it goes to somebody else. It's somebody else's problem. Why saddle that on somebody else? No woman should be forced to have a child against her will. That goes back to it's my body, my choice type thing again. I will get to a point where we all can ask some questions in a minute, I promise. Abortion on demand. This is the Doe versus Bolton and Roe versus Wade. Both of these were abortions for any reason in all 50 states. The third trimester, though, aborts were limited to 0. Nobody said, third trimester. They all backed off and said, if it's in the third trimester, excuse me, we shouldn't do that. Shouldn't have an abortion. So limited to 0, zilch, nothing. The demographics of women who had an abortion in 2019, again, this is 2022, I realize, but it takes them a long time to compile this stuff, and they don't keep up to it each year. In fact, we're lucky to find some of these statistics. 57% of the women that had abortions in 2019 were in their 20s. 31% were in their 30s. Teens ages 13 to 19 were 9%. 4% were in their 40s, and 85%, a vast majority, were unmarried. That's according to those places I told you, we got them from the CDS and the Gutenberg. Oklahoma, well, look at it, closer to home now. House Bill 4327. This is the bill the Oklahoma governor signed not too long ago, banning abortions after fertilization. It's the strictest prohibition in the country. It effectively prohibits almost all abortions in the state. It says some places that you can get an abortion, but you have to turn it into the law if it's in a rape case. We'll talk about that when we get down to it. See, I forgot I did it that way. Okay, effectively prohibiting. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Abortion Bill 4327 overview says civilian lawsuits are now possible. Someone can be sued, who performs or induces an abortion. I don't believe this. I apologize. I thought I had it turned off. So much for technology. And I think it was my wife on top of that. So. Probably was. Where you at? Civilian lawsuits are now possible. I'll get back to that. They can't be brought against a woman who's had or seeks to have an abortion, but anyone can be sued who performs or induces an abortion. And this is scaring the doctors a lot because they're afraid of what they can actually do and can't do and wind up being in violation and maybe even going to jail. Anyone who knowingly engages in the conduct that aid or abets the performance or inducement of abortion can be sued. That pretty much opens a wide open gate for lawsuits. And I got behind on a bunch of my buttons here. We'll do it again. Lawsuits can't be brought against a woman, I mentioned, that has had or seeks to have an abortion. It does allow the use of the morning after pill, the Plan B pill, I think it's called, and it's known as the morning after, but it would prohibit medical abortions using pills. You can't abort with pills, but you can use a morning after pill, which doesn't make logical sense to me at all. If you're using it for one, you're using it for the other. So, but that's me again, my personal opinion creeping in, which I don't need to. Some of the exceptions in the bill was if it's necessary to save the life of a pregnant woman in a medical emergency, then that exception is honored. Also, if the pregnancy is a result of rape, sexual assault, or incest, that must be reported to law enforcement. And it has to go to them first before they can have the abortion, which frightens a lot of people, because if you're a lady, a rape is probably the most traumatic thing you could ever possibly have. And that's not from me, that's from my girls and my daughters who have, like I said, one of them's an EQ, and they get those cases in there from rapes and incest. And they never get over it, regardless of what they do. There's never a relief from it. If you abort it, you're guilty for that. If you don't abort it, you're guilty for that. Every time you look at the baby and the baby cries, it reminds her of that rape. And so there's a lot of factors that delve into that we don't often think about when we're talking about abortion. To save the life or preserve the health of an unborn child, that's an exception that's in Bill 4327. Removal of a dead unborn child, that's an exception. And the removal of an ectopic pregnancy, where the fetus grows outside of the uterus. And sometimes it's also the case, I forget what they call it, I knew it, I had it today. Tubal pregnancy, yeah. That's not the one I'm thinking of, but the one I'm thinking of is one that's not viable outside of the womb, that it will not live whatsoever. Carrie has had them with 22 weeks where their insides were on the outside. You know, all their intestines, everything's outside. There was no skin to cover it. It's outside the body. And then they're expected, of course, to try to save the child. And I told her I wasn't going to bring her up too much in this, but I can't really help it because I get, flooded with some information sometimes on it. So. This bill passed 73-16 by the Oklahoma House. So according to the Oklahoma House of Representatives, and that this was the will of the Oklahoma people, 73-16. So we're going to look now at non-biblical arguments. I told you we'd get a chance to where we get to that. And we're going to do that now if we can. These are what we see more than we do the biblical arguments, actually, because of the press and the international feeds that we get from all the networks and all. This is probably what you'll hear more of. And I'll use it as a response and reply, but really it's actually pro-choice and the answer to pro-life. It will be the two. It's kind of yin and yang there. First one we're going to look at. The response: no infant in the womb has self-consciousness. So therefore, it's not a human until it does have self-conscious. The reply: self-consciousness isn't necessary to humanness. Science says kids don't become self-conscious until they're about a year and a half old. So there's the yin and the yang. Physical dependence. It's a parasite intruding on the mother's physical domain. Actually, if you look at it scientifically, that's true. It depends on the mother for everything to live and grow. No, sometimes it goes on after that. You're right. It's not an extension of the mother. They have their own blood type, fingerprints, sex, and it's nesting in the placenta. Here's the next response. Safety of the mother is a response, and it's illegal abortion is dangerous. 5,000 to 10,000 deaths offered as evidence in that behalf. Saving moms from death from a coat hanger in a back alley somewhere. This is what they were afraid of if Roe versus Wade was overruled. The reply: it actually saves lives. Maternal death rates for childbirth is 1 in 10,000. But I believe that's in normal childbirth and not pre. From 22 weeks, it's almost zero survivable. 25 weeks, about 50% survivable. And over 25 weeks, it jumps up to, 80 to 90%, depending on what the problem was to begin with. Rape. Here's the one that everybody throws up. Well, what about rape? Rape should not be forced to carry an unwanted pregnancy on top of the mental as well as the physical traumas and indignity. And again, when this mother looks at that child, if she carries it to term, every time it cries, it's going to remind her of how it came to be. And we don't think about that sometimes with what emotions that causes on the mother, especially when they're as young as 13 years old. Does it justify killing the child? This is the reply. It doesn't take the evil out of the rape by aborting abortion rather than, or adoption rather than abortion. That's the solution. And it's, not a bad idea. But I'm not sure that that's always the answer either. And again, this is why I'm saying we got to kind of temper our feelings somewhat to understand what the other side comes from. The incest is another form of rape, but like rape, most cases go unreported because of fear and procedures to confirm the action is terrifying and terrible. What they put a woman through after rape is almost as bad as the abortion. I mean, they do terrible things to that woman for that, to find out for sure whether it was rape and to try to trace down DNA and all those other things. And it gets very, very hard on the victim. Deformity detected by prenatal tests relieves the family and society from being forced to take care of the deformed. Their quality of life would be zero. Reply: does this justify killing the child? Quality of life should not be a substance for existence. Similar arguments are used for whatever that word is. I can't ever say it. It's that's it, infanticide and euthanasia. This is for the older folks. Yes.
Tipo's mom was told to abort him because he was born. Obviously, it didn't happen. Sometimes that's
yeah, ultrasounds can mess them up. I mean, and like I said, they do operations, I know, in the womb and stuff with ultrasounds, but yet, we're still fallible, as far as looking at that stuff.
One test they can do that says, well, your child's going to have this disease or that disease, and sometimes that's wrong. I've seen that on the news where, the lady was, said that her child was going to be normal, and she was born perfectly normal.
Yeah, blood tests and all that too. Only the Lord knows for sure, to be real honest about it, what's going on. But he's in charge of that. And whether it's good or whether it turns out not good, the not good comes because of the sin in the world. We know that. That's why the bad things happen to good people. And it's going to continue to do so. We're doing the best we can with science and medicine, but still, we've got a long way to go. We've come a long way. At one time, it wasn't too long ago, I know at least in my lifetime, where if you were just a couple of weeks early, you were in trouble because they just didn't have the stuff. And now they go down as low as 22 weeks, and that's pretty quick. Yeah, Preston.
Come a long way in medicine, but in some ways we've digressed.
It's true.
I'm wanting to say something so bad and I can't. I've got this passage in my mind because I get upset about things like this. It's not like I'm mad, but I'm mad because it exists, and I keep thinking about James 1:19 and 20. It says, so then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So as you're presenting all of this, as we're hearing it, you know, I used to say, and it's very polarizing, that this is worse than anything in my mind, that Hitler ever did to the Jews. And it was atrocious, completely unspeakable what happened to the Jewish people in the Holocaust. And here we allow it in our society. But yet, then you start to point out the trauma that women go through. You know, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, look at, it's exactly right what you're saying. Look at what the young lady has gone through, and if she's been raped. Look at what she goes through if she has an abortion. I mean, it's just traumatic either way. You know, and to try to wrap your mind around that, and we have to back up and look at the scriptures, and then look at it through the scriptures, so that we'll have a correct view.
But, you know, what's really interesting to me is that the Romans were exceptional at abortions. They knew how to do it and were very good at it. And that was at the time of Christ, and yet nothing in the scriptures says abortion. Nothing. But what it does say is, you know, we have to love, we have to respect life, we have to love one another. All those things, we have to go from there. And the way I see this, I mean, in this and in capital punishment and all these other ethical things, regardless of whatever you decide, you're going to have to stand in front of God and defend that. God's going to say, you know, why? Why did you believe this way? Why did you preach this? Why did you demonstrate this? Why did you do these things? We're going to have to, each one of us are going to have to do this. It's not just we're going to be able to go in there as a church group and say, well, here's why we were all, you know, for pro-life, Lord. He's not going to say that. He's going to say, hey, Bob, you know, why did you take the stand you took? Tell me why. You're pro-choice? Why? You're pro-life? Why? Because we got to answer for those things. You're for capital punishment. Why? You're not for capital punishment. Why? See what I'm saying? We've got these things to consider in ourselves before we can go pass judgment on anyone else. We have to know for sure that I can stand before God and say, God, here's why I did this. And not only in this case, but in all cases, we're going to have to defend everything we've done. And if that don't scare you, something's wrong. Because I don't know about you, but I got a whole lot of skeletons rattling in my closet. And yeah, well, we do have a good lawyer. You know, we got Jesus Christ. He's pleading our case, and the judge is going to go along with what the prosecuting attorney says, and he's the prosecuting attorney and says, I'm not going to do that. There is no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus, Romans 8:1. Anyway, let me move on. We've got some more to cover here. But thank you for your comments and your help. I do appreciate it. I honestly do. Now we'll look at the kind of biblical arguments on the biblical side. Response, Genesis 2:7. And Marty brought these up very well last week, I'm sure. The breath of life comes from God, but it doesn't occur until birth. He said, well, that was when he breathed the life into Adam. That's how when Adam was born. So that's what it is. It has to be the breath of life coming in. That's their response for that. But the breath is not equal to the human life. Life continues to exist after breathing stops. That's what I just mentioned. We got to stand before God. How are we going to do that if there's no life? That life is there. It's given to us as soon as the conception is done, as far as I believe. 2 Corinthians 5:6-8, Revelations 6-9 goes along with that if you want to write those down. Response, biblical arguments. Again, Job 34:14-15. If his spirit and his breath were not there, all flesh would perish altogether. So it has to have his spirit and his breath, they're saying. Breath begins in the observable life outside the womb, but life exists within the womb. Luke 1:44. So you see, there's both sides will try to use these things against one another. when what we need to be doing is figuring out how we can stop it. As far as I'm concerned, that's where we need to go. How can we stop it? What help can we give to those that have to go through it?
Please. It's about iniquity, and we're studying Christian ethics. And the passage in Genesis 15:16 about the Amorites, and their iniquity is not yet full. This is kind of tough because I really do need help understanding this. Is iniquity for you different than iniquity for me? And I'll predicate that with, we work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. What might upset one brother, it might not upset the other brother. That's why Paul abstained from eating meat sacrificed to idols. So we have to be careful not to offend. But yet, this doesn't bother me, so would it be iniquity? But yet that bothers them. Is that iniquity? Is that you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. But also in relation to that, is we are to be either a stepping stone or a stumbling block, one or the other. In other words, my opinion can cause someone else to stumble. So I have to be careful when I give my opinion out to someone else. If my belief causes them to stumble, I got to be careful about it. If the people that were looking at Paul with the eating of the meat, when he was talking about that, if they stumble, Paul said, I'll back off. I won't eat it. But it won't hurt me if I do eat it. And that's what he was trying to convey to us, I think, as well, is that we need to be of that mindset to where we don't want to deliberately offend or chase a brother off or even an unbeliever off because of our stand. You can run into it with, we haven't got to that subject yet, we probably will, but homosexuality. The Bible says explicitly that it's wrong, but yet we can run people off by saying, well, okay, you're going to go to hell because you're a homosexual. That's really not my call. That's God's call. I can tell him what it says, and that's as far as I can go. And it's kind of the same way with all these things in our ethics that we're talking about, in our iniquities. The iniquity was not yet full in Genesis, and it's not yet full today. But when it gets full, that's when the Lord's going to come back, and he's going to surprise us. And we're not the first ones that battled with these ethical things. And we probably will not be the last. But it's something that we do need to approach as Christians and as in love to our brothers and sisters and those outside of Christ, so that we don't ruin their path to come to heaven. I was, okay, hang on, I'll get to you in just a second. I remember when I was a kid, one of the guys that his name was Jimmy Allen. He was in Harding College, and to be honest with him, I had his Bible classes. He didn't impress me or anything, but we went to one of his lectureships. And he said at that time, he said that when we get to heaven, we're standing there in line, he said, somebody is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, you're the reason I'm here, because I listened to you. He said, by the same token, we're standing at the gates of hell, somebody's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, you're the reason why I'm here. I listened to you.
I was just going to say, I think we have a spiritual obligation to reach out to those who are not living a Christian life with love. But I do think we have that obligation to offer them the teaching and the examples that the Bible does give us when something is done in error. I don't think we're not going to tell them you're going to hell, and wash our hands of them. But I do think we have the responsibility of a believer knowing the truth and relaying that truth to them.
I don't disagree at all. The big thing I think that we, again, have to remember is that as believers, we know that God valued life. And we know that that was the most precious thing for him. He gave his own son's life, the most precious thing he had, and gave it for us, for you and me, so we can struggle over these things and yet have hope that it's not in vain, that we can do it, and still expect good to come out of it. And again, we have the responsibility to teach the word. There's no two ways about it. That's the number one responsibility for us. And these things that I'm doing here are basically to kind of just refresh us again and remind us that these are not always black and white, that there may be some gray areas in it. And if there's gray areas in it, then we need to be merciful, we need to be loving, we need to be kind, and realize that we may not have all the answers. I know I sure don't, and I'm trying to teach this class. And I still go through these things, and I still struggle with a lot of these ethical questions.
A multitude of sin.
Amen, amen. And back in the back, can't see who that is, but is that Don?
My grandson is alive today because a woman that is a Christian, a follower of Christ, decided that when she found out that the birth mother was going to have an abortion, she said, "I'll help you through it for 9 months. And we'll go to an adoption agency. We'll have it all set up as we go through this whole process." And because she had help for 9 months, she was able to carry that baby out. But if it wasn't for someone lifting a finger to help, she probably would have got an abortion.
And that's one of the things we can change, always strive for, is getting them some help somewhere along the line so they don't have to abort. And then there's a lot of abortions are just birth control. And to me, that's terrible. There's so much in, like I said, I see Carrie down there with, where people are coming back that are 16, 17 years old for their third abortions, for the third one. And, it's really, really tough. But as Christians, we still have to try to do the best we can. One more, Nick, because I think I heard the second bill. Go ahead.
These ethical items that we've discussed are the symptoms of the problem. And the problem being that we need more God in the world. And just like Don just said, going out there and being with people and helping people, no woman should have to go through rape. Well, why did that happen? Because you had somebody who acted on an impulse that needed assistance, that needed something in his life that he did not have. And I think these ethical questions are hard because we're trying to treat something that never should have happened in the first place.
Well, good. Again, I can't argue with any of these things that's being said because they're all true. But again, the thing we should be striving for is, we have our beliefs, and I respect that. And I also know that that every solution doesn't work in every case. We may be able to help this mother go through the 9 months of pregnancy, and someone else be lined up to pick up the baby, and then the next one they don't want to do that. So we have to go from that situation. It's almost situation by situation. But like I said, we'll try to do it as best as we can, and we'll pick up some next week and see what else we can talk about. So thank you very much for your comments and your questions, and I hope that you're enjoying the class somewhat anyway.